the research that we do in terms of high energy physics or elementary particle research in the Department of University of Wisconsin-Madison. And so in general, we try to answer the most basic questions, most fundamental questions about the universe around us, and that is, what are the different particles that exist, how do they interact, and how do those very basic particles and very basic elementary interactions give rise to the complex things that we see around in this universe, and that can also have connections with other parts of the department which do astrophysics and also cosmology and also that you will hear about in other lectures. So the fundamental thing which I'm going to talk about here is basically split into two components. The first is what we call high energy physics experiment. The University of Wisconsin has been involved in nuclear and particle physics for essentially since the beginning of these operations of what we would define as nuclear or particle physics, and really for the last 50 or 60 years has had one of the strongest groups in the country in terms of the funding and the faculty, the students, the number of PhDs produced, the number of researchers who have connection to the University of Wisconsin is really outstanding. So currently, the experimental effort in high energy physics is divided into three main areas. That is the LHC, the CMS, and the ATLAS experiments, which seen the faculty there, which is Sridhar Dasu, Matt Herndon, Talika Bose, and myself, Kevin Black, and our founding member, Wesley Smith, who is now emeritus for a couple of years. On the ATLAS group, our very prominent faculty member, Xiaolong Wu. And then also we have a neutrino program with Brian Rebel and also a visiting professor, Jenny Thomas, who is also a very prominent member of the neutrino community. And so we look for, in both the energy, the sensitivity, and also in the cosmic frontiers, which we have overlap with other areas, which we'll hear about, for the most fundamental interactions, whether it be things that we're testing by producing new heavy states at the LHC or searching for new heavy types of interactions at the LHC, or looking for new interactions with very weakly interacting particles such as neutrinos. So also we have a very large theory group in total, as you can see here, ranging over many different areas. And so in what we would call particle physics phenomenology, that's understanding the theory behind those interactions, which I was just talking about. We have Professor Yang Bai, Professor Vernon Barger, and Professor Lisa Everett. And also we have interface with cosmology via our faculty member, Professor Dan Chung, who works on cosmology and also in HEP theory. We have two faculty members currently who work on quantum field theory and string theory. That's Professor Aki Hashimoto and Professor Gei Xu, both very prominent members of the string theory community. And then finally, we have Professor Baha Balkatin, who works on a number of issues in both nuclear, particle, and also astrophysics. So I will briefly sort of cover the different areas to give you an overview of all the different things that we're working on. You can watch the videos or interact with those individual faculty members for more detail, which they are assuredly much better at going into than I am. So Yang Bai works on particle physics phenomenology. His two main areas of research in the last several years has been trying to understand the data coming out of the LHC and making predictions for new types of interactions and particles that may be produced there. And in connected to that as well is understanding the properties of dark matter, which we know exists out there in the universe from various astrophysical and cosmological measurements and arguments, but we have no idea what the particle content of that dark matter may be. We have a lot of exclusions and telling us what it's not, but we have yet to have firm experimental particle physics confirmation of what that dark matter candidate may be, and those are the areas that he works on. Baha here works on a number of things, as I mentioned. So he looks at the interface of nuclear, particle, and astrophysics, including neutrino properties, magnetic moments, mixing angles, looking at the dynamics of supernova, understanding neutrino cosmology and how those very light but very abundant particles help in our understanding of the development of the cosmos, and then also looking at how those particles and things can interact with nuclear matter, and trying to understand and better predict measurements which we can make to test those theories. Professor Vernon Barger has a long history, and he recently won the Sakurai Prize in particle physics for all of his seminal contributions to the particle physics phenomenology, connecting both theory and experiment. In particular, he's the author of several books looking at and a large amount of work looking at the collider physics for new interactions at the LHC. Also, his interests are also in neutrino physics and oscillations and understanding neutrinos, and as well cosmology and the early universe and the connections that are between all of those. Professor Daniel Chung is a professor of theoretical cosmology, and he looks at the interface of cosmology and high energy theory. He is joined this year by Professor Morris Munchmeiser, who will give his own presentation, as well, explaining how he is trying to look at data in order to better constrain some of those theories, as well as coming up with new phenomenological explanations. Professor Lisa Everett looks at physics beyond the standard model for supersymmetry model building and phenomenology, looking at neutrino mixing, standard model flavor puzzles, and CP flavor violation. Has done a lot of work in neutrino and supersymmetry model building. Professor Aki Hashimoto works in formal issues of quantum field theory and string theory, and trying to understand the long-standing problem of formalizing and developing a quantum theory of gravity, which has been a long-standing problem in particle physics, of putting together what we know seems to be valid from Einstein's general relativity, also with the standard model. And one of the exciting areas of there is string theory, which putting together these two things in a very mathematically sophisticated way. And more specifically, he works on the topic of holography, which is looking at the duality of some of these theories and making progress by understanding the analogies and similarities between strongly interacting theories and cosmology. Professor Gary Xu is looking at the interactions between string theory, particle physics, and cosmology. He has built several different types of string theory models in order to reproduce the standard model, but also then to explain some of the deeper mysteries of the standard model, and looking also at cosmological models, in particular from inflation and from string theory, and what kind of signatures of these ideas could look for experimentally. So looking at the history, or the recent history of UW high energy physics, as I mentioned, this is something that's been going on at UW for over 60 years. I'm not going to try to cover all of that in these 10 minutes, but I'll cover some of the things that we're working on currently in both CMS and Atlas. So we have a large CMS group of approximately 30 members, 4 faculty, 4 research scientists, 5 postdocs, and about on the order of 10 graduate students and many undergraduates who work with us. The main technical contributions have been to the development and of the trigger and upgrades and development of the NCAP muon system. And then a whole host, basically, of physics topics, which basically span the entire topic of a set of topics that you can study, from dark matter to precision standard model measurements to searches for new physics, for looking for new flavor violation, and all sorts of things. As well, we have a large Atlas group led by Professor Salan Wu, who has worked both on the technical aspects of the level 2 trigger, the silicon vertex detector, and also made seminal contributions to the Higgs discovery and then also the subsequent precision measurements of the Higgs, as well as exotic analysis. The Dune group is looking at the detector operations, oscillation analysis, and the construction of Dune, as that will be a major part of particle physics in the US for the decades to come. So just a brief overview of some of these topics, experimental topics. So the LHC has been now operating for about 10 years. It stands for the Large Hadron Collider, and it has 4 detectors as shown here. The UW group is involved in the 2 general purpose detectors, both the CMS and the ATLAS detector, which are large detectors, but with detailed and very intricate detectors with over hundreds of millions of channels, optimized to detect and reconstruct many different types of particles over the full range of physics topics that you can do at a collider. Some highlights from this are, of course, the observation of the Higgs boson in 2012. Many set of the decay channels that the University of Wisconsin contributed to, looking in the original discovery, and then also the precision measurements of different final states. Searches for dark matter, new types of quarks, new types of gauge bosons, new Higgs bosons, and also unexpected type of phenomena. And so essentially, the plan has been to continue to take and analyze data and upgrade the detector. Right now, we're during a shutdown, and we're upgrading the detector in 2 different phases, along with the LHC. However, there's also large data sets which we collected recently, which are still open for a huge amount of exploration and searches and measurements. So just as an example of this, the Higgs is now extremely well measured object in many different areas, and so this is showing the coupling measurements to different types of particles through its decays. And so we have now seen strong evidence for its or observation of both interaction with W and Z gauge bosons, the heavy quarks and leptons, and now working on trying to understand the lighter couplings, which are more difficult to measure at the LHC. And so far, it looks pretty consistent with the standard model Higgs, but we continue to make measurements and to test that, to make precision tests, and also to search for new exotic decays. Here is Professor Salan Wu, who has been involved in the ATLAS experiment since its beginnings. As I mentioned, the Wisconsin group played a seminal role in the discovery in the 2 channels shown here for the Higgs to 2 photons and the Higgs to 2 Z bosons going into 4 leptons, but also has contributed to many different areas of the physics. So that's not only Higgs physics, but also many different types of exotic searches and precision standard model measurements. And most recently, they made strong contributions to the observation of the coupling of the Higgs boson to the top quark, which was an important measurement because many models of new physics predict some special production or some special interactions with the top quark, which has an anomalously very high mass. Also, dark matter searches have been one of the principal goals of both of the ATLAS and CMS searches is to directly produce dark matter in proton-proton collisions, and depending upon the mass and coupling of the particular type of dark matter, actually, it's the only place where you can directly make these. There are complementary types of searches looking for both direct and indirect searches, but this is our best shot at actually having controlled production of dark matter, and the limits are the best in the world for some of these types of models. And for others, direct searches or indirect searches provide better constraints. ATLAS has also been working on the upgrade of the pixel detector, so both of the experiments will completely replace their inner detectors, which have been continued to get radiation damage from the high luminosity region of the detectors, and as well work on the trigger and DAC upgrade, which is being completely done with new electronics in order to take advantage of the high luminosity, and also are needed in order to deal with new constraints and new timing and new bandwidth upgrades of these experiments to fully exploit the high energy collisions. Salan is also working on quantum computing, which is a new area within high energy physics. and trying to take advantage of all the new advances that we've done with various different high computational power of artificial learning, and also taking into account the possibility of someday doing this with a quantum computer, and parallelizing this, and really making seminal contributions to the to the field here. So many people have gone through. So as I had mentioned at the beginning of the talk, there are a large number of people in high energy physics that have a connection to UW, either their time as a student or a postdoc, or as a faculty member. And the Atlas Group has contributed, for example, a very large number of people have gotten their PhD degrees with Salon over the years. And so there are about 60 graduate students and 36 postdocs who are now throughout the world and throughout the US have very prominent positions, as well as people going on to jobs in industry. So here is a picture of the different faculty members at UW CMS. So myself, I'm on the far right-hand corner there, but also Sridhar, Matt, Talika, and of course Wesley. So just an example of sort of the recent physics analysis, looking at the precision standard model cases here as our measurements of various diboson measurements at 13 TeV, which initially were not very well constrained by the data, and looked very different from the predictions. And as we've made more precise measurements and got a better handle on the backgrounds, of now are in good agreement with the standard model. Important measurements of after the discovery of the Higgs is to make sure this is actually the Higgs boson, and so that it will couple to things like the different particles as the Higgs particle is predicted in the standard model, or look for deviations from that. And here is a measurement from run 2 looking at the Higgs coupling to taus. Also, as I mentioned, the dark matter searches also are done on CMS, which is a complementary detector. And these are just some limits on various potential dark matter masses and coupling measurements, excluding different models and different cross sections in particle masses. So what type of projects are we doing and contributions have we done in the past towards CMS? So this is the main detector elements that were built in Wisconsin, here, where the MCAP muon system, where a large amount of that were done. It actually built here at Wisconsin, and then the group then contributed to the installation and led the construction and commissioning and also the operations of that as well. The calorimeter trigger was designed at UW, and also through various upgrades. And we have a large tier 2 computing center, which is shown here on the bottom right, which in the Chamberlain Hall, which does a lot of the analysis and of the reconstruction and production of Monte Carlo. My own particular project here is an upgrade with a CMS GEM electronics. So this is a new set of detectors that will go in the forward part of the CMS detector. We are working on this intended to reduce redundancy for the high pileup, improve efficiency, improve triggering, and UW is working on the back-end electronics, data acquisition, commissioning, and software that goes into the operations of those detectors. In terms, switching gears to neutrinos, this is becoming an increasingly larger part, and will be for the next several decades one of the major components of the UW particle physics group, which is joining Professor Rebel the same year that I joined UW Wisconsin a few years ago, and has started a NOVA, not only from working on NOVA, but started a DUNE group here. So essentially this is looking at accelerator-based neutrinos and trying to measure the oscillation probabilities and various properties of neutrinos. So this actually, interestingly enough, goes through Wisconsin for NOVA, which is the current US flagship experiment. It's a long baseline neutrino oscillation experiment. The neutrinos actually go fairly close to Madison underground, at least, and then to a far detector, which is shown here in northern Minnesota. And so it's a very pure beam of muon neutrinos, which then they look for muon neutrino disappearance and electron neutrino appearance in the far detector. And this is, if you thought ATLAS and CMS were large, these are the size of basically planes detectors, where you have to have a very large amount of detecting planes in order to and a large volume of a kiloton mass in order to get a higher probability of these things interacting, because they're very weakly interacting. In the future, they will shoot neutrinos in a slightly different direction from Fermilab. And so this will go, in this case, to a far detector in South Dakota in a Homestake mine. It requires a new beam. It will be the most powerful neutrino beam in the world when it's completed. And the University of Wisconsin is building essential detector components for that far detector, and Professor Brian Rebel is leading that. We also have interactions with other groups, and so, for example, you will hear from our other colleagues on looking at dark energy and dark matter, and also neutrino physics with the IceCube experiment, which is for the WIPAC talk, which is a unique facility because it's hosted, in fact, by UW, and it's very unique. So most of these large experiments are hosted by national labs, and IceCube is uniquely hosted here at the University of Wisconsin. We have a very large contingent here and several faculty who work on that, and you will hear about that separately. So in summary, there's a lot of things going on, from the energy, the intensity frontier, and connections with particle physics and cosmology. And so there's a very large group, a larger set of alumni, and so there's a lot of things that you can take part in if you join the UW Wisconsin Particle Physics group. So welcome to the adventure.